thanks for listening. My name is Kayla Willis. I am the Discipleship Director at Restoration Church, and I'm here with Neil Strickland. Neil, you want to introduce yourself?
No, but I am Neil Strickland, and I am part of the teaching team here at Restoration, and I am Encyclopedia Biblitannica, as some people call me, just the major Bible nerd, and that's the important part for this.
So, Restoration has done a couple sermon series on the Gospel of Mark. So, if you have missed any of those, you can go back in our podcast and listen to some of our Mark sermon series. But we're going to be entering into a new sermon series called 1 Week. And it's going to be looking at the 1 week that Jesus had left on earth before he died and was crucified. But to get into a little bit of Mark, we want to do a recap today. We want to look back over chapters 1 through 10 so that we're ready to enter into the last week of his life. So Neil and I thought we would talk through some of the important parts.
Yes, when we first open the book of Mark, we sit there and we go, why is it the book of Mark, not the book of Jesus? Well, the book of Mark is one of the 4 biographies of Jesus, all of which are named after their authors. Mark, he's not one of the disciples. If you read through the top 12, you go, he doesn't seem to make that cut. In fact, he was a friend of Peter. So it's more of Peter's account being told by Mark. And in this story, in the biographies of Jesus, we get a couple major concepts that show up a whole lot. One of them is the kingdom of heaven. And the kingdom of heaven isn't necessarily a brand new Christian idea. It's really the idea in Judaism that there would be a time when all of God's will and everything that God wanted would be enacted on earth, that all the Jewish people and everything would be happening the way God wanted it to happen. There's also a concept of the Messiah or Christ, and we will use those two different words interchangeably. They are the same word. So this Messiah or Christ figure is the person that's going to bring that kingdom and take God's will from heaven and bring it to earth so that all people can live this kingdom life.
So let's get looking into the book of Mark. So Mark starts out not with baby Jesus in a manger. We kind of totally miss out on the Christmas story with Mark. He just really cuts to the chase. I like Mark because it feels like he's a man of few words. And he just starts out the book of Mark by saying, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. He just goes, boom, Jesus is the Son of God. Know that from up front. And we get this crazy character, John the Baptist, who is sort of Jesus's cousin and really Jesus's hype man, who goes around and hypes up the crowds. Yeah? And just says, hey, someone's coming and he's going to be the Messiah. So we get Jesus all baptized and we get him started on his mission. And Mark chapter 1 really summarizes it by saying that he's going around and preaching the good news of God and preaching the kingdom of God has come near. So that kingdom concept that Neil was talking about is going to just be all through the rest of Mark. So everything we see is Jesus either demonstrating the kingdom and showing people what God's kingdom is like, or he's going to be teaching about the kingdom and he's going to be talking about what the kingdom is like. And he's asked people to believe in the good news, believe that the kingdom has come. And some of the first people that we see him interact with, right, Neil, is the disciples. We throw around that word a lot, disciples. How would you kind of tell people, what does the word disciple mean?
Oh gosh, I wish there was actually a clean way of understanding this, because the closest thing that we have in America, in American culture, might be an apprentice or a mentor, like mentorship situation, mm-hmm. But it doesn't really mean it as much, because for a disciple, that means you are literally living with them. So wherever your rabbi goes or your leader goes, you go with them. So if they go on vacation, you're going on vacation. They go to the bathroom, okay.
Maybe not to the bathroom.
Yeah, a little bit of break.
So you would think that Jesus would want someone with a high education or some kind of pedigree as the Son of God.
People that are quick on the uptake.
But the first disciples that we see Jesus choose are some fishermen.
Yes.
We've got Simon and Andrew. We've got James and John. a little fishing club of the disciples.
Yes, I like to think of those guys as actually competitive groups because Andrew and Simon, they don't have servants, but James and John's family do have servants. So it always makes me think like they knew each other and they were probably competing against each other's families. And so it's like, you can imagine like Jesus is talking to his disciples, like, and then we got James and John and Simon and Andrew, like, these guys? Like, no, let me tell you.
The competitors.
The competitors, yeah. So that's like a small town. They think that the town might have been only 2,000 to 4,000 people. So it's like a small town. Like, these might be the only fish dealers.
Small town rivals.
Small town rivalry, yeah.
I like it. So we see Jesus actually calls these people to be his disciples, to be his apprentices.
Yes, instead of normally where they would apply to be.
Oh.
So in this case, Jesus is reversing it already.
No application necessary.
Yeah.
He just invites them. And they accept. They just leave everything and follow him. But we also get some other disciples on the scene. We've got a tax collector. We've got Simon the Zealot.
Simon the Zealot and a guy named Judas Iscariot, which two guys would have been like, they're the ones with the anarchy jackets on. They're like, let's overthrow Rome. And they're like, that's their mindset. And then you've got another guy named Philip, which is weird because his name is different than everyone else's. He has a Greek name. So it's like, wait. Everyone's got Jewish names. And this one guy's like, shows up like, your name's not the same as ours. So they're a ragtag group of people that come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different political backgrounds. This is probably a situation when you get these 12 guys together, you're like, this is going to be an argument.
Yeah. And Jesus just puts all of them together and kind of puts them all facing the same direction, which in any other context for the rest of their lives, they would have never be seen with these people, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely not.
And so right from the beginning of Jesus's ministry, he kind of tears down walls from dividing people and he brings them together.
Now that he has his disciples and he's living in this context, he is trying to live out, or Jesus and his disciples are living out what would be sort of a normal Jewish lifestyle, and they would be going to synagogue on the Sabbath, which is Saturdays for us, and it is a day of complete rest where certain aspects of work are not allowed to be done. So let's think of it this way. There are certain things that need to be done today to keep life, and there are certain things that can be delayed till tomorrow that don't need, they're urgent, but they're important but not urgent kind of things. And there's a point where they're in a synagogue and you have this group that's called the Pharisees. Pharisees is a religious political type of group. They are embedded with the people. They are the leaders of, I would say, your everyday people. But these Pharisees, just like a Democrat or Republican, have ideas of how life should be done. And so when Jesus brings this group of people that are, some of them are Pharisees, some of them are not, and brings them all in, and they are all expected to act the same way. And they also expect Jesus to act like a good Pharisee, because you are in our social political context. And there's a man that has this hand, and it's withered. And Jesus poses a question about whether or not it's good to do, if it's right to do good on the Sabbath or not. That wasn't actually a new question for them. That's a question that other Pharisees among each other were arguing about. And for the most part, they would say, you can do good on the Sabbath, but you can do good also after the Sabbath. So if you can wait. And at one point, Jesus says to this man who has this messed up hand, stretch out your hand. And he stretches out and it's healed. What's funny is that by their laws, the Pharisees' laws of what is and is not allowed on Sabbath, in order for Jesus to have healed him, he would have had to have touched the man's hand. So he doesn't actually touch the man. So he both heals the man, but never breaks any of the rules that the Pharisees had set.
It's living in that gray area.
Yes,
finding
exactly.
the loophole.
Yeah, yes. So even if they were to go back and be like, he healed on the Sabbath, and they'd be like, okay, so when did he touch him? Well, he didn't touch him. Case dismissed.
Okay. So the Pharisees, why did they get kind of a rap for being the bad guys? Like, I feel like sometimes when we tell Bible stories, we're like, and then there were the evil Pharisees.
Right. Yeah, you should not see them as that, because it's just like saying there were Democrats and Republicans and libertarians, and they're just these different groups. In fact, we have Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus are two main Pharisees leaders that show up in these stories of Jesus, that loved Jesus, followed him, and cared for him. So definitely want to remove that idea of good or bad, but rather just see them as a faction with a set of beliefs.
Yeah, who might disagree with the radical way that Jesus is bending the rules.
Right.
They're more rule followers.
Exactly. And as Jesus is coming in, he is coming from among them. Like geographically and everything else, he's kind of in their area. And so at the very beginning of Jesus' ministry, a lot of the questions the Pharisees have for Jesus are more of, are you on our side or not? Are you a Pharisee like us? Or are you not a Pharisee like us? And it's more of like, even if you are a Pharisee, what kind of Pharisee are you? Just like you might say, okay, I'm a Democrat, but are you extremely this way or are you extremely this way?
More middle
yeah,
of
where
road.
are you? And so the same way, the Pharisees at first are trying to figure out where Jesus falls. But the funny thing is that Jesus doesn't really fall.
He doesn't.
He doesn't fall into either category. He is beyond it.
Yeah, so we've got all of these people who are watching Jesus. The disciples are watching Jesus, but they're really living life with him. The Pharisees are watching Jesus. And so he's healing all of these people. He's healed this man with the withered hand. He does several other healings throughout Scripture, but they're also listening to him. So not only is he demonstrating the kingdom, he's also declaring the kingdom through all of these teachings and parables. And some are easy to understand, some are a little less easy to understand, and even the disciples have to ask him for some clarification, and a lot of them point back to the kingdom, right? So two of my favorites are about the kingdom being a mustard seed, and about the kingdom being seed that's scattered. So with the mustard seed, you've got a teeny tiny little seed that grows and expands, and it's huge, and you wouldn't expect that from a teeny tiny seed. The kingdom is growing, is expanding, it's unexpected. And then the other one that I love is that the seed is scattered, that the kingdom is like seed scattered, that it grows on its own. And the farmer is there, just like, we're here, but God is the one who is doing the growing.
Yeah, another fun part about that, like the scattering, that I always think about is, the kingdom of heaven is going everywhere indiscriminately. It's not supposed to go, okay, like if you only have so much seed and you're worried about how much kingdom of God can spread, you would want to make sure that it goes in a specific area. You wouldn't throw it everywhere. And in this parable, and we encourage you to read it, this is a bad farmer. He just throws it everywhere. He doesn't. It's really not. The kingdom of heaven isn't reserved for the special.
Yeah.
It's open for everyone.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And so the disciples have kind of absorbed this teaching. They have absorbed that the kingdom of God is for everyone. They have seen that the kingdom of God is for everyone. And then they actually are entrusted by Jesus to be sent out away from Jesus to do this on their own. They've watched, it's like this whole like apprenticeship model is really playing out, that they've watched him do it, and now they're going to do it themselves. They're talking about the kingdom. They're also given authority, right?
Right. So you have Jesus showing them how to heal people and doing these miraculous things, and then he is also teaching them, here's what the kingdom of heaven is like, and here's how God's will should be enacted on earth. And he fills them up with this, and then he turns to them and says, now you go and do likewise. I'm going to send you out, and I want you to take the kingdom of heaven further and do everything else. That's the whole hope of discipleship, is that you are to become just like me to other people.
So then they come back after this big adventure that they've all been on. They are sent out 2 by 2, which I love, that everyone needs friends. That's a side note, but always doing ministry together. Don't go out and be a lone wolf, everyone. And so Jesus sends them out 2 by 2, and they come back and they are probably filled with incredible stories. Like I feel like it's like after you win some type of sporting event, I played volleyball, and you get back to the locker room, and then you kind of do the recap of like the greatest plays, or if Virginia Tech actually ever wins a football game, then you talk about the incredible plays.
I wonder, like, maybe this is just, I have terrible friends, but I wonder if they're trying to one-up each other.
Ooh.
Again, these guys the disciples are probably in their late teens, early 20s. So
a little testosterone, a little competitiveness.
Like, yeah. Like, well, I healed this guy who had 2 demons. Oh yeah, we had one that had like 3 demons in one guy.
I could totally see that. They're just absolutely swapping stories. But Jesus isn't done. Like, he doesn't just hype them up and say, you guys are incredible. Then he actually invites them away to rest, which is an appropriate response. They've been walking, they've been healing, they've been doing all these cool things. They're probably exhausted. But there's thousands of people that still kind of want a piece of Jesus. Now that they've heard about him, they've seen some of the crazy things, they've come and they want to hear him teach. But they're hungry, apparently, at the end. I guess Jesus, I don't know if like they start complaining about being hungry, or if Jesus is like, you know what these people need?
A snack.
A snack. You know what would go great with my teaching? Some food. It's like a good Southerner.
If I remember correctly, might be from other stories, that they are actually chasing Jesus down. And so these people have been running for miles all day. They're carting people around, and they're probably pretty exhausted.
Yeah.
And he's pulled them away from anywhere near a town.
Yeah.
So they haven't maybe picked up food yet or gotten lunch.
And the disciples just want to send them home.
Yes. Yep.
They're like, hey, we're kind of done being around all the people. I wonder if any of them were introverts sometimes. They're like, we just need a moment, send them away. And Jesus is like, no, they don't have to go anywhere to get food. You feed them. I mean, what would your reaction be if Jesus said, just you feed 5,000 people?
Like, I'd be like, in my head, I'm like, I've got 2 packs of gum, like 2 sticks of gum, and that's it. I don't know.
So Jesus finds out that they just have 5 loaves and then 2 fish. And he miraculously, we don't know how, but feeds all 5,000 people. Like sometimes I wonder if it's like Wonder Grow bread, if they like break the bread and it goes and then grows back out to like the regular size piece, or if it just like appears as they're handing it out.
I like to imagine there's some music playing and like the lights go down. It's like a magic show. He throws it in a basket, spins around, and he like opens it up, and there's just tons of bread and pigeons fly out.
Yes. I love this story, and it's actually, there's 2 very similar stories in Mark, the feeding of the 5,000 and the feeding of the 4,000 just a little bit later, because it is miraculous, absolutely, but it's not maybe life or death. Like he is giving them a cute little charcuterie board, and I love that Jesus cares about the details of people, that he wants to provide for people, not just in life or death, but in their daily needs. And I think that this shows kind of his heart and some of his priorities, that like people are a priority no matter their need to Jesus. So the disciples are here. They've done the big stuff. They've seen the small stuff. And the Pharisees have kind of been hearing lots of whispers, probably lots of stories. What's the Pharisees thinking?
So like you said, they are watching. The disciples have the front row. They're not even front row. They're experiencing it. They are in with Jesus, learning everything. And the Pharisees are just watching it from their perspective. They are not entering into this in the way the disciples are. And between the 2 feedings that you just mentioned is this very significant story. And a lot of people don't realize that this is the watershed moment. In fact, multiple of these biographies put this story in the center to kind of say, this is a major point for us. And this is where Jesus and his disciples are eating with some Pharisees, and they turn to Jesus and they go, why is it that some of your disciples are not washing their hands? That sounds gross.
Yeah, like that's nasty.
Okay. So I'm going to have to give you some ideas and some of the rules. Is that you have in the Jewish culture is that you want to make sure that you're eating only clean food. And if you consume something unclean or do something off, it might keep you from going to the temple. And what the Jewish people did is they kept coming up with new rules and regulations to better help themselves worship God appropriately to the best of their ability. So we've mentioned the Pharisees before. I would say they are people that love God, and they love God so much that they want to create the best way to love God. But they've gone beyond that. So they came up with these rules that if I were to go to a market and I was to high-five a Gentile friend, or if I was to pet a pig, now I've got pig cooties on me. And so I want to go, before I go eat food, I want to wash my hands so that those pig cooties don't get consumed by me.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. So they had all these regulations, but it wasn't necessarily about sanitariness. It was more about ritual cleanliness towards how they could worship God.
So they didn't care so much about the pig filth. They cared about the pig cooties.
That's exactly it. So you could go and pet your cow and walk straight in and eat dinner.
No.
So they turn to Jesus and they start calling out Jesus' disciples for not following it. And one of the other parts I love about this story with Jesus is that Jesus is washing his hands. Jesus is not ready to rock the boat unless there's a kingdom purpose. He is not a rebel just for rebel's sake. He is a rebel for the kingdom of heaven. He wants to bring the kingdom of heaven to earth. And so Jesus doesn't see the hand washing as an obstacle, but the Pharisees do.
Yeah.
They want to break fellowship. And so he has this conversation and he points out to them, you are missing the point. And he points to them that they are not taking care of their elderly, their family members. Instead, what they're doing is the money that would be used to support their aging parents, they were taking and setting it aside for God in a reserve bank account that they could sometimes borrow from. And so Jesus says, you have come up with these regulations. That reserve account was something that you guys fully made up. Meanwhile, you are neglecting the thing that God said, which is taking care of your parents.
Jesus is basically calling them hypocrites.
He is calling them out, yeah, and this is a watershed moment when he starts calling them out for this. Not just that the way I would say it is that earlier, his first conversations with them about the healing is a conversation, and now we're at a point where Jesus is correcting. He is saying, you guys are not being the people that you think you are. You are saying these things and acting this way. And he starts to break apart because for them, they had built these rules and regulations to create a culture and a value system that they believed is what made them Jewish. And for him to step in and start to break that apart and say, these things that you think makes you who you are is not what makes you who you are. That is not, the kingdom of God is not found in your rules and regulations. It is found in me. He doesn't go that far just yet in the story, but read the story and you will see that he begins to break apart what their expectations were and their beliefs were.
Yeah, he's really, he even quotes an Isaiah prophecy that says, these people honor me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. So he's saying, like, I care about your heart. Let's do a little heart check here.
Yes. And he wasn't against the rules and regulations, actually. He was
just do a heart check.
Yeah, Jesus wants all of you. He wants the fullness of you. And in great contrast to the story, the story ends, and Jesus walks off with his disciples, and they're probably, I imagine the disciples are like, Jesus, we got to talk about your PR. Like, how do you talk to other people?
Yeah.
But
not making friends with the powerful, not a good look. Not a good look.
And then he says, okay, guys, come with me. And he heads up straight north, outside of, or either right to the edge or outside of Israel. We only have a few times when Jesus actually leaves the land of Israel. This may be one of the ones, it's debated, but he goes up to this land called Tyre and Sidon, which is full of Gentile people. So I think about those poor little disciples of his that are just like, they've been sheltered. They go to Sabbath, they go to synagogue on Sabbath, they do all the right things, and then he's like, we're going to Vegas, guys. And he takes them up to this place, and the story of Mark is, all of these characters we've mentioned so far have been Jewish. And now we have an experience of a Gentile woman who comes up, she is broken, and her heart is shattered because her daughter is being terrorized or by a demon, and she's being hurt. And she comes to the disciples, and the disciples, I just imagine how they would think about it, is you are a Gentile woman that worships other gods that are not the God of Israel, and you play demon games, you get demon prizes. So it's not a surprise to them that she would be dealing with this. And they were probably like, hey, Jesus, let's leave her alone. Let's get out of here. I imagine her pain and her desire and her need for her daughter to be healed would push beyond anything that she feels as far as shame or hurt. And she's willing to go out of her comfort zone and keep pushing into that because she knows that Jesus can heal.
Yeah, this is a mama bear that's not accepting no for a response. And she's going to verbally spar. She's going to have uncomfortable conversations. She's just here for her daughter, which is totally understandable.
Jesus doesn't discount her. Even though she's done all the wrong things, she's done the exact opposite of everything his disciples did. He goes to her and he sees the faith that she has and he marvels. So you see this contrast between the religious leaders missing Jesus and the woman that has no experience with Judaism at all and the God of Israel. She sees Jesus. And I think that's a big thing, that Jesus does not discount her.
Yeah. She, it even says, because of your reply, like how she talks to Jesus shows her faith. And because of that reply, it says the demon has gone out of your daughter. Like, so much faith for someone who didn't grow up with any of the Jesus backgrounds. Like, Gentile just means non-Jewish.
Right. And
so she didn't know about all the stories that God was coming to rescue people, probably, right?
No.
She just knows, here's a person that is healing people, that is loving people, and maybe he can help me too. That she didn't have to have the background knowledge to experience Jesus in the moment.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. So here we have that woman that I would assume she's heard some of the stories. Like the stories have gone out.
Yes.
And like you said with the feeding the 5,000, there are people that are continuing to bring lame and sick and kind of broken outcasts to Jesus. And Jesus, as he's gained in popularity, doesn't, as my mom would say, get too big for his britches, where he discards the outcast. He doesn't use people to have flashy stories, and now that he's got a big following, he just stops healing them. He continues to have stories of healing all through the sections of Mark. And right before what I think is a very pivotal moment, we see a man brought to Jesus who is blind. And whoever brought this man begged Jesus to touch him. And so Jesus takes the blind man by the hand. So this time he is actually touching the man. So he gets a little bit of credit for the healing, I would assume. But he brings him out of the village, which I think is interesting because if I were wanting to make sure everyone knows that I'm powerful, like I would gather as much people at the center of the village as I possibly could. But Jesus brings this man outside the village and he spits on his eyes, which weird way to heal someone.
Yeah, not very safe. We're worried about eye wash, like hand washing, but not the spitting on people's eyes.
Not the spitting on the eyes. So he spits on his eyes and then he lays his hand on him. And he asked the blind man, like, do you see anything? And this is a funny part of the story. The blind man says, I see people. They look to me like trees walking. It's like, but how do you know what trees look like? So it was a little fuzzy. It was like when you went to go to the optometrist and it's like 1 or 2. Well, 1 apparently didn't work because people looked like trees. And so then again, Jesus put his hand on the man's eyes. And then he saw distinctly and was cured.
He didn't have to re-spit, just hands again?
Yeah, apparently no. Spitting twice, not required. But that man was healed, as Jesus healed a lot of people. But he saw a little bit, and then eventually he saw everything in full. Which is similar to the next interaction that Peter has with Jesus. Where Jesus knows that people are talking about him. And if I knew people were talking about me, I would want to know what they were saying. And so Jesus comes up and asks his disciples, hey, what are people saying about me? Who do people say that I am? It's kind of testing the waters. Mm-hmm. Remember, at the very beginning, Mark's kind of declaring, this is the Son of God. This is the Messiah. And so now Jesus is kind of testing, what are people picking up on? Are they getting it all the way? And the disciples answer and they're like, people have mixed reviews. You have like a 3.5 on the 1 to 5 Yelp review of maybe you're John the Baptist.
Healing's going really well. Handling the Pharisees and calling them out, not as good.
Not so good.
People aren't receiving that as well.
And so I can imagine Jesus being like, okay, I get that. But then Jesus really cares about one particular group's opinion, and it's who he's talking to. He cares enough to ask what the disciples think. And so he says, who do you say that I am? Which is a question that I kind of imagine Jesus asking all of us. Like, who do you say that I am? Jesus cares what we each think about. Who do you say that I am? And this is the moment where Peter declares out loud, black and white, no more of this gray in between business, you are the Messiah. And it feels like, at least to me, that at this point, a lot kind of changes in the story of Mark. Because starting here, things get a little dark.
Yes. Very, very dark. He begins to warn them and tells them that he will be eventually taken to the cross. And if they have this idea that not only are you the Messiah, but you are the Messiah that we think, So that's their concept of the Messiah. You are going to go and retake Jerusalem from Rome, and we will have Israel as a nation that is no longer under anyone else's rule. We're going to become powerful. You are the Messiah, this one who is supposed to do what? Bring the kingdom of heaven, and the kingdom of heaven is going to look like a ruling Jewish people. And one of the things that he actually does say to his disciples is he says, "Take up your cross and follow me." Well, that's not a Jewish way of execution. By the way, if you don't know, cross and crucifixion is a ancient way of killing people. That is not how Jews killed people. It was actually a learned method from the Persians, and that specific way of killing someone is reserved for political rivals. So to go and say, for Jesus to turn to them and say, "Take up your cross and follow me," it's a little bit of a mixed message, because one of them is there is a revolution and it's going to fail, and you need to be willing to do this. And of course, Jesus, doing what he always does, is speaking so spiritually, and speaking to not just to his disciples then, but to our disciples now, of our willingness to lay down our lives and what the cost is for following them. Because he is telling them, you are going to follow me. We are going to Jerusalem. If you want to be my followers, be willing to take up your cross. Be willing to go to this lengths, and understand that it's not going to look the way you think it's going to look.
Yeah. I mean, that feels like a hard pill to swallow, for Jesus basically to say, "Hey, come and die."
Right. But then they also declare to the Messiah, and they know what the stories say, the Messiah wins.
Yeah.
So it's hard for them to get.
And not only do they not really accept, or at least want to accept, the predictions of his death, a lot of times we see kind of glimpses that they don't even really get the priorities of the kingdom, right? Like, they're walking together on a road, and he's interacting with James and John, and they approach him, and instead of asking something maybe like, how can we get better? How can we heal people? How can we serve people? Their question for him is nothing like that. No. Their question is, "Hey, Jesus, can we sit at your right hand and your left hand in glory?" Basically, can we have power? Can we be your favorites?
Because once you kick out Herod and Pilate and become the king, we would like the cushy government jobs, and we want to be second and third in command. And if you didn't know this, Jesus, when we were running our fishing empire in a town of 4,000, we had servants, and we've done some management. Andrew and Peter, not so much. Yep. Just let you know.
We're kind of a big deal.
Right.
So
right.
These guys are totally teacher's pets. James and John,
Yes.
trying to cozy up. And Jesus, I can just imagine him like shaking his head, and just like the most patient, loving way that Jesus can, he kind of calls them out, and he says, "Hey, I get it. It is a something that people do where they want power," but he even says, "It's not supposed to be like that among you. On the contrary, whoever wants to be great among you must be a servant, and whoever wants to be the first must be a slave to all." And that is probably not what they wanted to hear as they follow Jesus.
No, not at all. They've still got this idea of what they think the Messiah should be like, despite Jesus trying to speak and show them what the Messiah is going to be like. The Messiah is. He's trying to show them, what is the Messiah? It's one that teaches people to love one another, love their neighbor, and to care for outcasts, heal other people, and to love Gentiles, and to throw away things that are preventing you from getting closer to God. And they're going, okay, kingdom of heaven, that's government position. Management experience is going to be very important on a
lot of money, probably.
A lot of money. And that's what leads us up to what we're going to get into in chapter 11. This 1 week of Jesus' life, and we've been talking about these different characters that we could look at and see where have they come from, and where are they in this story that we're about to pick up. We have the outcasts, the people that have been healed, who've had their eyes spit on and figured out that people in trees are different, have really turned up for Jesus, and they love Jesus, and they're so excited. Then you have the Gentiles, we have stories, and we mentioned the woman earlier who Jesus said, "You are part of this, and you are welcome." And she's also been on the outside seeing Jesus and doesn't quite understand what the Messiah is or the kingdom of heaven. She just knows that she's after Jesus. When we get into this last week, we're going to have Romans that are going to be also hearing and seeing all these stories. The Romans are so interesting to me in that they are so removed. Not only are they not close like the disciples, they are not even within the Jewish culture to even understand what Messiah or the kingdom of heaven is. They are completely apart and watching all of what we're going to be talking about go down this week. And then you have the leaders. And the leaders, there's part of them that is full of jealousy because Jesus has just been gathering people and he's doing really well and people are interested in him and he's being declared the Messiah. And none of them would be declared the Messiah of someone that could be ruling. There's some jealousy there, but there's also this layer of fear because the Romans are over all of Israel and they are the ones with the military power. And as people start to get behind Jesus, they've already seen multiple people attempt to overthrow Rome in the past, and there's a lot of collateral damage. To give you some numbers here, at the time, people speculate that Jerusalem was about 50,000 people of population, and during Passover, it would swell to 300 to 400,000 people.
Shoot.
So that's just a ton of people. We were trying to figure out ideas of how to think about this. Lane Stadium says 66,000 people, and then the surrounding Roanoke Valley area, including like Floyd, Botetourt, and all that, I think is around 300,000 to 400,000. So if you just took all those people and tried to slam them into Lane Stadium,
Oh my gosh.
it's just not going to work. Now, yeah, Jerusalem's bigger than Lane Stadium, but my point is, Jerusalem is designed to hold only so many people. It's now way larger, and the Romans are only staffed to about 1,000 people, 1,000 soldiers. Sorry, the Romans leave about 1,000 soldiers. So there's some worry there that there could be an uprising, and that people might get the idea that, hey, I think we have the people to do this thing, and that never works out because sure there are 1,000 soldiers, but if you win that, you're going to lose everything else because Rome will not take that. And so that even if they were to overthrow within a few months, all of the Roman army from all of the surrounding
come and crush them.
Yes. So the leaders, they might, even if they don't like Jesus and there's jealousy, there's this other layer of fear. And they're also, just like the disciples, expecting the wrong Messiah. They think of the kingdom of heaven as this thing, as this physical, they're with James and John.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the disciples. And the disciples who have been living this out with Jesus, they have watched him heal people, care for people. They have gone with him where he has battled against the people that taught them as kids, their culture. They've watched him kind of blow that apart and break apart what it means to be Jewish. And they're learning, okay, what does it mean to be Jewish in the kingdom of heaven? And what does that actually look like? They're also learning that apparently it includes Gentiles. And they're trying to wrap their heads around these things. They're very confused. And we are about to continue into a week with them.
Yeah. And it seems to me, as you were talking, I was just thinking about how really their whole identity has been kind of peeled away, that they are pulled out of their careers.
Yep.
And then I would assume their kind of main identity is very Jewish as they're entering into actually getting to follow a rabbi. And then Jesus slowly pulls away a lot of that identity as well. And so he's setting up a little bit that their identity that's most important is his follower. That all the rules that they thought that they knew, everything that they thought was important, power, following the rules, nothing else is important but him.
Exactly.
Well, hopefully you've enjoyed kind of a little bit of our talking through Mark. We would encourage you to go and read Mark 1 through 10 on your own. There are so many stories, so many teachings that we couldn't possibly cover all of them. So whether you're reading Mark or you're listening to Mark, we encourage you to engage with the scriptures on your own, particularly as we begin our next sermon series. So thanks for listening.